I stood frozen outside the mahogany door, my hand trembling against the cold brass handle, as my fiancé's voice cut through the silence like a blade. 3 years. 3 years of building a life together, of late nights designing our dream home, of believing in forever, and here he was, signing it all away for $50 million and a woman named Vivian Chen. The contract rustled as Ethan Park scrawled his signature across the bottom, the sound impossibly loud in my ears. My engagement ring suddenly felt like it was burning into my finger. I wanted to burst through that door, to scream, to demand answers, but my body refused to move. Instead, I pressed my ear closer, my heart pounding so violently I thought they might hear it through the thick wood. Richard Park's voice, cold and transactional, filled the room. Ethan's father had always looked at me like I was a stain on his perfect family portrait. But I'd convinced myself love would be enough. How naive. How utterly, devastatingly naive. Diana Chen, the investor whose capital was apparently worth more than 3 years of devotion, outlined the terms with clinical precision. Marriage to her daughter Vivian within 6 months. Public announcement within 2 weeks. Full integration into Chen Capital Ventures portfolio. The Park Meridian Group would receive its $50 million injection, and in return, Ethan would become a purchased asset, a commodity traded for corporate expansion. The grotesque poetry of it made my stomach turn. I should have left right then. Walked out of that Connecticut estate with whatever dignity I had remaining. But some masochistic part of me needed to hear him fight for us. Needed to hear him tell them no. The words never came. Instead, Ethan's response was barely a whisper. He agreed. Just like that. No hesitation, no protest, no mention of the woman who'd spent 3 years believing she'd found her person. Margaret Park, his mother, actually sighed with relief, as if they'd narrowly avoided some terrible catastrophe. The catastrophe being me, apparently, the black architect who'd somehow infiltrated their precious bloodline. The Pritzker Prize winner whose 40 million view TED Talk still wasn't enough to earn her a seat at their table. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Simone asking if the meeting was going well, if Ethan's family was finally warming up to the wedding plans. I wanted to laugh. I wanted to scream. Instead, I turned off my phone and straightened my spine. The door opened suddenly, and I barely had time to step back before Richard emerged, Diana Chen at his side. They looked right through me, their faces glowing with the satisfaction of a deal well executed. Margaret followed, pausing just long enough to offer me a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. And then Ethan, my Ethan, walked out looking like a man who'd just signed away his soul and was trying to convince himself it was the right price. His face went pale when he saw me standing there. Good. I hoped the guilt ate him alive. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The grandfather clock in the hallway ticked away the seconds, each one stretching into eternity. I watched him search for words, watched him open and close his mouth like a fish drowning in air. There was nothing he could say that would fix this, and somewhere deep in his coward's heart, he knew it. I pulled the ring off my finger, the diamond catching the afternoon light streaming through the massive windows. 3 carats, cushion cut, set in platinum. He'd proposed on a rooftop in Brooklyn, the Manhattan skyline glittering behind him, like a promise of everything we'd build together. That promise was dead now. If you're feeling that rage building in your chest right now, if you want to see what happens next, hit that subscribe button. This story gets so much more intense, and you won't want to miss a single moment. Also, drop a comment telling me what you would have done in my position, because what I did next changed everything. The ring hit the antique side table with a sharp clink, the sound obscenely cheerful for what it represented. Ethan flinched, actually flinched as if I'd struck him. I almost wished I had. He reached for me, his hand extended in what I'm sure he thought was a comforting gesture, but I stepped back so quickly I nearly stumbled. "Don't touch me," the words caught in my throat, trapped behind the tears I absolutely refused to shed in front of him. "Not here, not now, not ever again," he tried to explain, his voice cracking with what might have been genuine emotion if I'd been stupid enough to believe it anymore. Responsibilities, family legacy, the company his grandfather built, all the excuses of a man who'd chosen convenience over courage. I found my voice finally, and it came out steady and cold. I asked him if he'd ever loved me, or if I'd just been a pleasant distraction until it was time to do his duty. The question seemed to genuinely confuse him, as if love and duty were supposed to exist in completely separate universes, and I was being unreasonable for expecting them to intersect. He stammered something about how I knew what I was getting into, how I understood the pressures of his position. Understood? I'd spent 3 years watching him navigate those pressures, supporting every difficult decision, standing beside him through every family dinner where his parents looked at me like I was the help. And this was my reward. This betrayal dressed up as inevitability. Margaret reappeared then, drawn by the sound of voices rising in the hallway. She had an envelope in her hand, cream-colored and heavy, the kind of stationery that costs more than most people's monthly rent. $500,000, she announced, as if she was doing me an enormous favor. A transition payment, she called it, compensation for my time and understanding. The envelope sat between us on that table, next to my discarded engagement ring, and I couldn't decide which was more insulting. They'd actually calculated my worth, assigned a dollar value to 3 years of my life, and thought that would make this acceptable. Thought that would make me go away quietly, maybe even gratefully. The fury that rose in me then was incandescent. I heard myself speaking, listing my accomplishments like a resume, like I was trying to prove my worth to people who would never see it. 7-figure architecture firm built from nothing. Pritzker Prize at 29, the youngest woman to ever receive it. Designs that prioritized beauty and accessibility, that gave dignity to communities everyone else forgot. 40 million people had listened to me speak about creating spaces where humanity could flourish. But none of that mattered, did it? Because I didn't come with a corporate merger attached. Because my last name wasn't connected to old money or political influence. Because my skin was the wrong shade for their carefully curated family. Albums. I left the envelope on the table. Let them choke on their guilt money. I left the ring too. That symbol of promises that meant nothing when tested against balance sheets and board meetings. Ethan called my name as I walked toward the grand entrance, his voice desperate now, finally showing some emotion. Too little, too late, I thought. Always too little, too late with him. The door was heavy, oak and iron, and the weight of 3 generations of Park family history. Pushing it open felt like moving a mountain. The June air hit my face, warm and thick with the smell of cut grass and old money. My car was parked in the circular driveway, looking distinctly out of place among the luxury vehicles that cost more than my first apartment. I made it to the driver's seat before the tears came. Not pretty crying, not delicate sniffles that could be dabbed away with a tissue. No, this was ugly, gasping, world-ending sobbing, the kind of crying that came from somewhere deeper than heartbreak